Last week we heard a little mini Mahabharata, and we heard about Duryodhana trying to fire up the troops. And then we heard about how Krishna and Arjuna blew their transcendental conch shells and kind of shattered the hearts of Duryodhana and company. And then Arjuna asked this interesting questions. Please drive my chariot between the two armies so I can see who's going to fight. And Krishna does a Bhishma Drona Pramukhata, right in the face of his grandfather and his guru. Obviously, Krishna's doing this for a reason. And he's arranging ultimately for the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken, and using Arjuna as a sometimes, as we'll see in the course of the Bhagavad Gita, as a playing the role of an ordinary person, although he's not ordinary, he's a great devotee. So we are on text 28. And Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth is drying up. And Prabhupada writes that any man who has genuine devotion to the Lord has all the good qualities which are found in godly persons or in the demigods. Whereas a non-devotee, however advanced he may be in material qualifications by education and culture, lacks in godly qualities. And Prabhupada there is paraphrasing the verse that he quotes later in the same purport. As such, Arjuna, just after seeing his kinsmen, friends, and relatives on the battlefield, was at once overwhelmed by compassion for them, who had so desired to fight amongst themselves. So this is the first of the 5 reasons that Arjuna is going to give to not fight, is compassion. He has compassion. He's going to kill all of these people. His swajanam, and we'll read about that. We'll hear about that in a minute. Prabhupada writes a little later that practically the whole community, all blood relatives Arjuna, had come to fight with him. This overwhelmed the kind devotee like Arjuna. So it's not just anybody. It's not only even Bhishma Drona in front of, but he's seeing all these people that in one way or another, practically speaking, he is related to. So he was thinking in this broad-minded way about compassion. In the Hitopadesh, it says that petty-minded people say, this is mine and that belongs to others. But to the generous, the whole universe is a family. So Arjuna, in this sense, was being generous, compassionate, kind-hearted. And therefore, Prabhupada quotes that verse, Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchanas, that you see there in the purport, that a devotee has all the good qualities that we find in elevated souls like the demigods. Prabhupada in a lecture says that Arjuna was overwhelmed with compassion, but Duryodhana had no such feelings. Why the contrast? Arjuna is a devotee, ready and willing to excuse his enemies. Even if devotees excuse those who insult them, Krishna takes a different position, and he is strict on this matter. Krishna will not excuse or tolerate any insult to his devotees. So listen to this next sentence. If we want to please Krishna, we must never insult his devotees. And we have to be prepared to kill so-called relatives when this is Krishna's plan. So we never insult Krishna's devotees. And Prabhupada also speaks another, he flips it, that, okay, yes, Krishna is so devoted, such a devotee and compassionate. But then Prabhupada in another lecture, he picks up in this word swajanam, my kinsmen, right? Swajana, my people, right? Or with my, same people. Prabhupada says, so Arjuna was not a coward. He was a competent warrior, but still dehatma buddhi, the bodily concept of life is so strong that Arjuna admits, Drisva tu swajanam Krishna. My dear Krishna, I have to kill my own men. Own man means this bodily relationship. Why are others not own men? Everyone is own men because everyone is Krishna's son. So when one becomes Krishna conscious, he can see everyone as own men. And when he is not Krishna conscious, he simply sees own men where there is bodily relationship. This is the defect. So that takes some work, but to see everyone as brother and sister because we have the same father, not just people of my country, people of my faith, people of my, in India, my caste sometimes, people who have they like the same sports team as me. These are all own men. But we are trying to train ourselves to see beyond the bodily concept and see everyone as Krishna's son. So there's a lot in this verse, and we'll do 2 more verses, then we'll see if you have any questions, because they're connected. So here, the main focus has been on Arjuna's compassion, and that he's a kind-hearted person in Prabhupada's purport, right? At once he was overwhelmed by compassion. Now the next verse, 29. My whole body is trembling. My hair is standing on end. My bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand and my skin is burning. And Prabhupada writes that Arjuna's symptoms in this situation are out of material fear. Now, if you read the purports carefully, you say, what? He just said he was such a passionate, compassionate devotee. Now he says, out of material fear, namely loss of life. This is evident from other symptoms also. He became so impatient that his famous bow Gandiva was slipping from his hands. And because his heart was burning within him, he was feeling a burning sensation in the skin. All these are due to the material conception of life. So, material concept, how do we reconcile that with what we just heard in 28, that he was a compassionate devotee? So let's look at the next verse and see if we can get some reconciliation. Arjuna says, I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only causes of misfortune, O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon. Prabhupada writes that Arjuna envisioned only painful reverses in the battlefield. He could not be happy even by gaining victory over the foe. The words nimitani viparitani are significant. When a man sees only frustration in his expectations, he thinks, why am I here? And listen to this, everyone is interested in himself and his own welfare. No one is interested in the Supreme Self. And here's the next sentence is the reconciliation. Arjuna is showing ignorance of his real self-interest by Krishna's will. So Arjuna, yes, he is that compassionate person, as mentioned in 28, but he's showing his ignorance by Krishna's will, as mentioned in 29. So it both can be there. And this is also the beginning of Arjuna's next argument that I will not enjoy. And that'll be coming up more in the next few verses. So any questions, comments, thoughts up till now on those 3 verses?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have a doubt.
You have a doubt? Okay.
Prabhuji, see, Arjuna he said, no doubt he is a great devotee of Lord Prabhu. There is no doubt about it. But being a Kshatriya, how come this kind of uncertainty, and compassion could creep in a Kshatriya? I could not really comprehend, Prabhu. I also want to quote in this context in...
But wait, one at a time.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. So same. I'm only coming for that only, Prabhu. Okay. In Canto 4, Chapter 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Dhruva Maharaj, his brother Uttama, was killed by Yakshas, he never hesitated. He became very angry, and he took his army and annihilated 130,000 strong army of the Yakshas to take revenge for his brother Uttama's killing by the Yakshas. So he is also a great devotee. But at the same time, when his brother is killed, he becomes angry and do that. Like that, when so much injustice has been done by these Kauravas, headed by Duryodhana, to these Pandavas, personally, he's with Arjuna and his wife and his entire clan. How come Arjuna show that kind of compassion to this kind of people? I don't understand. So my presumption, Prabhu, is it just because Drona, Bhishma was standing there, for whom he had very high regard, he is afraid to, he has the compassion. The same compassion he did not show when he fought against Drupada's army. He killed thousands of Drupada's army people. The same Arjuna killed and brought to Drupada's prison, imprisoned him and brought it to Dronacharya. At that time, he did not show any compassion. How come this compassion suddenly come from? This is my...
Well, you said a lot of things there. First of all, you made a good point that we don't read about Dhruva's personal relationships with those people that those yakshas and rakshasas that he killed, whereas this is his grandfather and his guru.
Yes.
Who here on this call wants to kill their guru? And I don't, and as we mentioned last week, I don't think we can say that Arjuna's affection for his martial arts guru is any less than our affection for our spiritual master. And none of us would even dream of killing our spiritual master. So that may be part of it. Another part is that Dhruva was stopped. He was wrong. He was corrected, right? He was chastised for doing that. It wasn't good. We read about that in the 4th canto. He was stopped for doing that. It was mistaken on his part. So that's another part. Because Dhruva was a devotee, so when he was chastised, he said, okay, rok, I see, stopped. Right. So there's two things. Another thing is that people are individuals. Kshatriyas are not, they're not manufactured in a factory. Or no living entity is. We all have our individual natures. And even though we may belong to a certain Varna, there is individuality certainly within that Varna. We can't say, obviously, Yudhisthira is very different than Bhima, right? They have very different personalities, even though they're both ostensibly Kshatriyas. So, and another part is that you see Arjuna is he's struggling with this. And we're going to find this out in the 2nd chapter, verse 31 to 38, that Krishna preaches to Arjuna that even if you think you're your body and you think you're a Kshatriya, you should still fight. So that's so that identification, that Arjuna is struggling with these two things. He's a great devotee, and he's compassionate, and at the same time, he does recognize his sometimes his Kshatriya nature. At least Krishna addresses that part of him in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a lot of, I hope that helps. There's a number of ways of looking at this situation and comparing it to Dhruva Maharaj. Subtik.
So Prabhu, can I understand that it is only because...
By the way, who's speaking? I don't see it lighting up. Who is speaking?
Well, sorry, Prabhu. I not switched on this video. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Ramakrishna.
It's Ramakrishna.
Prabhuji, so can I understand that is it because Arjuna was fighting his guru and grandfather, that compassion crept in his mind, not because he fought with others? Is it?
Well,
so?
I gave a number of reasons. I gave a number of reasons there, right? Not just one, but that is definitely, like we highlighted last week. You know, there's this huge army, right? You know, it took up a huge amount of space. And where does Krishna drive the chariot? Bhishma Drona Pramukhata, right? So another part of the answer, which I didn't yet touch, is it was Krishna's desire that the Bhagavad Gita be spoken, and that Arjuna sometimes plays the role of someone in material consciousness. Okay?
Thanks. Yes.
And even Dhruva, you know, he's teaching us how to not be controlled by anger, a devotee should not be controlled by anger and revenge. And we read in the purport that a devotee doesn't think like that. Sometimes Krishna thinks like that. Not like exactly revenge, but he becomes, part of being Bhaktavatsal is he becomes the enemy of his devotee's enemy. Even though the devotee, a Jata Shatru, doesn't think in terms of friends and enemies. We also learned that in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, not to think in terms of friends and enemies. Prahlad Maharaj speaks like that. So a devotee may forgive, but Krishna doesn't necessarily do so, out of love for his devotee. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments?
Very
good question.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam. Amrita Leela Devi here.
Yes, Vatsaji, Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, the question is in line to Prabhuji's questions, and even I got partly answer. It was striking to my mind, like Arjuna, all the Pandavas, they're compassionate. Even Yudhishthira Maharaj is more compassionate than Arjuna. But all those thoughts, anxiety, panicness, due to a lot of factors, as you mentioned, like own family, friends, relatives, especially spiritual, Guru Maharaj, Guru Dronaji, and grandfather, all those were there. That was the main reason he was panicking. But was it only for Arjuna, or most of the people would be going through this phase? Only Arjuna, like as Sri Krishna wanted to tell the Gita, and Arjuna was picked as a representative, or almost all souls were in the same position. I thought.
Yes, well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that was my question, Prabhuji.
Well, if I understood your question correctly, yes, we are, the idea is that we are all in one way to look at it is we're all in a situation similar to Arjuna. We're bewildered, we're in the material world, we're not sure about doing our duty, and we don't have love for Krishna. So it gives Krishna, and by Arjuna playing the role of an ordinary person, it gives Krishna the opportunity to preach to all of humanity for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So it is Krishna who is covering Arjuna, putting him in so-called material consciousness, so that the Gita can be spoken and that we can benefit. And Prabhupada also says that the same benefit that Krishna got by seeing Arjuna face to face, we can get by reading the Bhagavad Gita. So we're associating with Krishna every, Saturday morning at Sadhe Panch Baje. Is that 5:30 for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So, by the way, I'm very impressed. We're both I'm performing a little austerity. I'm up until 10 o'clock. You're performing a little austerity, getting to class at 5:30 in the morning. Okay, shall we carry on? Let's carry on. Okay, so text 31 through 35, this talks about Arjuna's next reason for not fighting. And that is, I'm not going to enjoy. So let's hear about that. I do not see how any good can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle, nor can I, my dear Krishna, desire any subsequent victory, kingdom, and here's the key word, or happiness. Prabhupada writes that he thinks that by killing his kinsman, there would be no happiness in his life, and therefore he's not willing to fight, just as a person who does not feel hunger is not inclined to cook, right? You know, why would you, I mean, if you're cooking for yourself, why would you cook if you're not hungry? It's a nice analogy. He has now decided to go into the forest and live a secluded life in frustration. But as a Kshatriya, he requires, here's part of more answer about a Kshatriya. He requires a kingdom for his subsistence because the Kshatriyas cannot engage themselves in any other occupation. So what does he do, right? But Arjuna has no kingdom. Arjuna's sole opportunity for gaining a kingdom lies in fighting with his cousins and reclaiming the kingdom inherited from his father, which he does not like to do. Therefore, he considers himself fit to go to the forest and live a secluded life of frustration. And it would be frustrating for him because, as we're hearing, he is a Kshatriya. And well, there was one thing that I wanted to read in the last verse, something from Prabhupada. Oh, so yeah, I don't know if we fully reconciled, 28 and 29. We did to most, that Arjuna is covered by Yogamaya, but internally he's a pure devotee. That's the main point. And also that as devotees, we do care about our material well-being, but it's not meant to be the same priority as our spiritual well-being. And we see that, Prabhupada mentions in that purport in 30 that he writes that in this material world, this is in the 7th canto, every materialist desires to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. Actually, however, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. Isn't that interesting? One is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. So we're trying to, we for many, many lifetimes, we've been conditioned to endeavor for happiness, but we're trying to change that to endeavor for Guru's happiness, endeavor for the Vaishnava's happiness, endeavor for Krishna's happiness. Okay, so 32 to 35. Well, a little bit more on this purport. So this is Arjuna's choice, right? He has to kill his relatives. That's not going to bring him happiness. How is he going to enjoy? Who's he going to enjoy with? We're going to hear that in the next few verses. So fighting doesn't make sense. And so he can go to the forest and just, live a life, but Prabhupada says, of frustration, because he's a Kshatriya and he needs something to rule over. And he has no opportunity. His only opportunity is to fight. So, as they say, he's between a rock and a hard place. He's in a very difficult situation. And then the next verses say, "Oh, Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? Or Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me? O maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? So yeah, if, you know, this doesn't apply to devotees on this call, but we see in the world that, you know, if people get some opulence, they want to show it to others, right? If the person next door to you has bought a brand new Toyota, you really want to show that brand new Mercedes-Benz that you have, right? Or if they have gotten into University of Pune, you show, oh, my son got into IIT, right? You know, part of your happiness in the material things is this whole comparison thing, right? I was talking, I don't know if I told you this story at another class, but we have a devotee here who's he's Punjabi, and he makes a lot of jokes about Punjabis. I guess you're allowed to make jokes about your own people. So he's very wealthy, and he builds homes, people's homes. So what they do in America is, well, they do this in India also. You buy this big plot of land, and then you build all the houses on it, and you sell them, right? So he built a house, and this person said, well, it was the first house, right? And the person said to him, well, what happens if the other houses, the houses that aren't built yet are smaller than mine? The property value will go down. And the devotee said, no, don't worry about that. All the other plots are owned by Punjabis, and they're all going to want to build a bigger house than the next person. So it's like that in the material world. So Arjuna is kind of saying, I'm going to have this kingdom, but all the people that I'd want to kind of show off or you know, take care of, they're all going to be dead. So how am I going to enjoy? If the people that because he knows enjoyment means with other people. And if they're all dead, what's the use? So he's clearly Ram Krishna. He's in material he's portraying a person in material consciousness. Okay. Let me see if there's in the purport. Prabhupada writes in the beginning, Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and senses, right? Go can mean cows, go can be senses, and Indra means like the Lord of, right? By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. Now, do you have faith in that? If we actually realize that one sentence, we can be a pure devotee. One sentence. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, then automatically our senses are satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses. He wants God to be his order supplier for such satisfaction. Right? And Prabhupada he liked to use this word order supplier. I never really fully understood it till I was walking in Loy Bazaar one day in Vrindavan, and I saw Rasa Bihari Lal and Sons, official order suppliers. And then I got the idea that you can get anything you want from Rasa Vihari Lal. Right. So we think of Krishna as our order supplier. And then a few sentences later, Prabhupada writes, Arjuna's deep affection for community and family members is exhibited here, partly due to his natural compassion for them. So here Prabhupada is saying there's like this mixture. He has some natural compassion, and he's still in this own men, right? Yeah, own men. These are my people. It's just like in the very first verse of the Gita, Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, Kshetra, Raja, no. Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, Samaveda, Yudhyotsavaha. Then he says, Mamaka, Pandavas Chaiva. Mamaka are Dhritarashtra saying, my people, Mamaka, and those Pandavas out there. So Arjuna is a little bit in that same Dhritarashtra consciousness in this first chapter. Just one more thing on this verse. And then a little later, Prabhupada writes, as a natural devotee of the Lord, Arjuna did not like to retaliate against his miscreant cousins, but it was the Lord's plan that they should all be killed. So yes, so Krishna's hand is in this. So let me do 36 before I take any comments. Sin 36. Okay, no, actually we could take questions because now the topic is changing to another cause. But these last two purports, they were about this idea that I won't enjoy, therefore I should not fight. So any questions or comments on these verses, 31 to 35? It's all good? Okay, then I'll continue. But please,
Dandavat Pranam, I have one question.
Yes,
What
Mataji.
is the reason that Arjuna is using the word or the pronoun we instead of I?
We, in which?
In 30 to 35, he says, what pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra?
Oh, well, first of all, we don't know if it's in the Sanskrit. We'd have to go over that. But it's actually just in English, it's sometimes called the royal we, R-O-Y-A-L. And it's a way of indicating yourself, one person, right? What was that? Yeah, and it's a kind of high class way sometimes instead of saying I. Yes. If I say we will be late for Bhagavad Gita class next week, it means Vraja Vihari will be late, right? And Prabhupada used it sometimes. I believe that famous, let me just see if I can, 1 second, I'll just check.
It could probably be Arjuna is very confident of the 5 Pandavas going to remain alive even after the war. So that in that context, he might have used the word we for his brothers also, Prabhu.
Possible. It's possible. Yeah. I couldn't find what I was looking for, but that's possible. Let's see. What avail to us our kingdom happen when we may desire? I mean, it could be like you're saying, that could be that. It also could be just like general people, especially Kshatriyas. What avail to us as a Kshatriya, our kingdom, happiness, even like when those for whom we may desire. Yeah, but he is really talking about himself.
Just to be clear, so he is not including Krishna in the we.
No. No, definitely not. Definitely not. That's an interesting lens that you're looking at that through, right? Because it does, you could say, yes, he's saying, oh, Govinda, what avail to us? But I never read that anywhere, nor did I think ever think like that. But that's really, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's an interesting way to look at it. I just don't think that's, I always took it to be the royal we. I never thought that he was.
I mean, you don't see Prabhupada writing anything about this we in any of these purports wherever Arjuna's talking about us or we. But I have heard other preachers say that he is implying that, you know, after everybody is left, you know, including Krishna, what is there to enjoy actually? So.
I've never read anywhere that it would be including Krishna, but maybe I'd have to hear what those other devotees were thinking. When teachers like Dronacharya, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, you know, yeah. I don't want to contradict what other devotees say, because I don't know what they were thinking. If we get into the details of this a little bit, the two words, Arjuna calls Krishna Janardana, which means the maintainer of all living entities. So obviously he's not thinking Krishna's going to be killed. He's the maintainer of all living entities. So Arjuna's wondering how Krishna, everyone's maintainer, can be desiring everyone's death. And the word Janardana has another meaning. Jana means person, and Arjuna means killer. So it was one of the acharyas, Baladev Vidyabhusan. He says that Arjuna calls Krishna Janardana by suggesting, oh, Janardana, if they need to be killed, then you do it. You know, you are the remover of the earth's burden, so you should kill him. Why are you asking me to do it?
Even Prabhuji, we have not heard any time.
And then the Pandavas also, you know, how long did the Pandavas, anyone know how long the Pandavas were reigning after the reigning, you know, in charge after the Battle of Kurukshetra? It was 37 years, such a short amount of time. So how much can you even enjoy in that short amount of time? Someone had a point they wanted to make, right? Someone was speaking.
Yeah, Prabhuji, this is Amritalila. I was thinking, like, I was just trying to give my point for the question of Mataji. Like, even we have not, I used to read Bhagavad Gita from my childhood. I have never came across like when Arjun thought like everyone, including Krishna, will go.
Yeah, I'd have to see what that what those devotees were referring to.
Maybe.
But it could be the other Pandavas. The point is still the same, that it's material consciousness. Because the main point to take out of these verses is not the we, but is this idea that Arjuna, you know, he's not going to, his reason for not fighting is he's not going to have fun, basically. He's not going to be happy. And that's the second reason he gives for not fighting. Anything else?
No.
Okay, but thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so let us continue to okay, the next reason for not fighting is sin. It's sinful. Sin will overcome us if we slay such aggressors. Therefore, it is not proper for us to kill the sons of Dhritarashtra and our friends. What should we gain, O Krishna, husband of the god of fortune, and how can we be happy by killing our own kinsmen? So here there's a mixture of the two purposes, happiness and sin. And Prabhupada quotes the Artha Shastra that says that there are 6 kinds of aggressors: a poison giver, one who sets fire to the house, one who attacks with deadly weapons, one who plunders riches, one who occupies another's land, one who kidnaps a wife. And that all 6 of those happen to the Pandavas. Such aggressors are at once to be killed, and no sin is incurred by killing such aggressors. Such killing of aggressors is quite befitting any ordinary man. But Arjuna was not an ordinary man. He was saintly by character, and therefore he wanted to deal with them in saintliness. This kind of saintliness, however, is not for a Kshatriya. Lord Ram was so saintly that people even now are anxious to live in the kingdom of Lord Ram, Ram Raja. But Lord Ram never showed any cowardice. So this competition between him being a devotee and being in the mood of a Kshatriya. So the Pandavas, they suffered, right? All of those things. They were poisoned. The poisoned cake that Duryodhana fed to Bhima. Their house of lac was put on fire. Sakuni cheated them in a dice game and plundered their wealth. The Kauravas occupied the Pandavas' lands. They stole Draupadi by by bogus means. So Artha Shastra allows such aggressors to be killed. So why did Arjuna say sin will overcome us? It's because Arjuna was speaking, as Prabhupada says, from a higher level, from the level of Dharma Shastra. And Dharma Shastra, which is higher than Artha Shastra, says that killing one's friends and enemies is never permitted. So there's all these things going on, and Arjuna is trying to be, saintly about the whole mess. And Prabhupada writes that saintly persons are advised to forgive. Right? We as devotees, there's so many seminars like by Mahatma Prabhu and others about forgiveness. Arjuna considered that rather than kill his own kinsmen for political reasons, it would be better to forgive them on the grounds of religion and saintly behavior. He did not therefore consider such killing profitable simply for the matter of temporary bodily happiness. So he's going back and forth to different, he's trying to basically, you ever see this in your own life? You just try any argument to get what you want. Right? And you try to come up with 3 or 4 different ones, even if they sometimes contradict each other. So Arjuna is coming up with so many things that he does not want to fight. Even if the reason seems a little contradictory to something that he said before, right? Because, Prabhupada writes in the purport, Arjuna considered that rather than kill his own kinsmen for political reasons, it's better to forgive them on the grounds of religion and saintly behavior. He did not therefore consider such killing profitable simply for material bodily happiness. But earlier we heard that he was considering happiness. So in 37 and 38, O Janardana, although these men, their hearts overwhelmed by greed, see no fault in killing one's family or quarreling with friends, why should we, who can see the crime, there's a we again, who can see the crime in destroying a family, engage in these acts of sin? So greed is it's a problem. In the 7th canto, Prabhupada writes that by making plans with determination, one should give up lusty desires. Similarly, by giving up envy, one should conquer anger. By discussing the advantages of accumulating wealth, one should give up greed. And by discussing the truth, one should give up fear. And the Hitopadesh says, from greed springs anger. From greed, lust is born. From greed, illusion results as does ruin. Indeed, greed is the cause of all sin. So we want to be greedy for Krishna's mercy. Tatta loyam apimulyam ekalam. it's very interesting, and Prabhupada will sometimes translate the word loyam as greed, strong desire, but greed meaning, greed is stronger than a strong desire, right? Greed, if you think of a person as greedy, they just want more and more. Even if they're a billionaire, they want more and more. So we're supposed to try to be like that in terms of getting Krishna's blessings and thinking of Krishna and serving Krishna. I want more service. I'm going to chant more rounds, greedy for Krishna's mercy, but not greed in the sense here, because Arjuna is criticizing. Their hearts are overtaken by greed, and therefore they see no fault in killing one's family or quarreling with friends. Wasn't it Aurangzeb who put his own father in jail? Is that right? Did he kill his father? Yeah. Yeah. And of course, Kamsa did the same thing, right? You saw Aurangzeb out of greed, and he was so envious, it seems. Yeah.
Kamsa does the same thing.
Yeah, Kamsa.
Actually, I have a question in the purport about 3738. Srila Prabhupada writes the last, the second but last sentence. Obligation is actually binding when the effect is good. But when the effect is otherwise, then no one can be bound. What does that mean, and how is obligation different from duty?
Well, let's look at the purport. A Kshatriya is not supposed to refuse to battle or gamble when he is so invited by some rival party. Okay, that's a mundane Kshatriya, right? Under such an obligation, Arjuna could not refuse to fight because he had been challenged by the party of Duryodhana. So ordinarily, he has that obligation. In this connection, Arjuna considered that the other party might be blind to the effects of such a challenge. Arjuna, however, could see the evil consequences and could not accept the challenge. Obligation is actually binding when the effects are good, but when the effects are otherwise, no one can be bound. Considering all these pros and cons, Arjuna decided not to fight. So it sounds like it's very connected to the previous point that I made about Artha Shastra and Dharma Shastra. So Artha Shastra may say, yes, if somebody challenges you, you have to fight. Dharma Shastra is you take into all these other dharmic things into consideration. Unnecessary killing, killing of people who are my guru and grandfather. So Arjuna is on a higher level than Duryodhana, and Duryodhana is approaching him, or the gambling match. And Yudhisthira, right? He didn't refuse, and look what happened. Right. So as devotees, we part of our consideration is pralena parichiyate, that you judge something by its result. So going to Mangalarti, good or bad?
Good.
Good. Okay. What if you have COVID, and you can not only hurt your own health, but maybe give it to others? So then Mangalarti, good or bad?
Yeah, bad.
Right? Or jalebi, very good. And you have a liver problem, very bad. So we weigh the pros and cons, as it says in the next sentence. And even things that seem generally very good may not be always good. So we want to, so we're not bound. And it's a big concept, Mataji, because ultimately anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. This is explained by Lord Chaitanya as the six parts of surrender, And the first two are anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, to accept things favorable and to reject things unfavorable. And what's favorable and unfavorable may differ according to desha kala patra, according to the time, the place, and the circumstance. How's that sound?
That sounds fantastic, except my thing is, how do you come to that decision? Because some things are very apparently obvious, but not all situations are that obvious, especially if you're a neophyte devotee. Right?
Well, that's what Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra is for, right? There's other devotees you can talk to. And it's also very helpful to talk to other devotees, because sometimes when we're in a difficult situation, we are attached, we're blinded either by passion and ignorance or by attachments. And so going to someone who's more detached and looking at it more objectively, you know, a trusted friend or a spiritual master or, you know, trusted senior devotee, whatever is appropriate, that can really be helpful. Also, praying to Krishna, just going in front of the deities or your deity at home and just praying for guidance. And also being patient. You know, Krishna has a different watch than we have. We're like, you know, Krishna, it's already been 2 days, give me a sign, right? And, you know, Krishna may be not in as big a rush as we are. How's that? But, you know, I'd say that the majority of the time, we kind of know what's right, but doing the right thing doesn't seem to be as much fun as doing the wrong thing. The other thing we do, another dishonest thing we sometimes do is we shop around for an opinion. We go to we keep on going to the devotee until one of them's going to tell us to do the thing we want to do. Okay. Text 39. Thank you. Okay. So now the next reason for not fighting is that it'll destroy the family. Because if, you know, these Kshatriyas, they were maintaining law and order. They were making sure people didn't behave. They were kind of like, I have a friend who was in Singapore recently. And anyone been to Singapore? Yeah, I thought you might have been. There's a lot of rules and regulations there, right? And everything is very pukka, but you really can't misbehave too much because there's CCTV everywhere and everything. So in ancient times, you had Kshatriyas instead of CCTV. And they kept things in order. And so Arjuna rightly is thinking, I mean, this is a good argument. If we lose so many Kshatriyas, who's going to keep people on the straight and narrow path? So he says in 39, with the destruction of the dynasty, some people pronounce it dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. So when the men are gone or become irreligious, the women say, hey, well, you know, what if they can do that, why can't I? And Prabhupada talks about the importance of good population in human society, beginning of the purport, is the basic principle for peace, prosperity, and spiritual progress in life. The Varnashram religion's principles were so designed that the good population would prevail in society for the general spiritual progress of state and community. Such population depends on the chastity and faithfulness of its womanhood. And then at the end, Prabhupada says, irresponsible men also provoke adultery in society, and thus unwanted children flood the human race at the risk of war and pestilence. And of course, we're seeing war right now. So yeah, things are so bad now that people don't even think twice, right? If you see something on television and they portray someone having a relationship with somebody else outside of marriage, it's like, you don't need, it doesn't even register anymore as something terrible for some people, right? Because it's just that they get bombarded with that. But actually, you know, adharma bhavad Krishna pradishanti kulastriya, that it's the media has conditioned us to think that these things aren't so bad. But I remember, you know, in the 80s when I first moved to India, it wasn't like that. First of all, it was only Doordarshan 1 and Doordarshan 2 bus, if I remember. Right. And, you know, the big thing on TV was, I remember in Vrindavan, there'd be the TV about this big, and people would be watching the Mahabharata, like 200 devotees crowded around a TV this size, things like that. But now there's, I don't know, hundreds of stations and all kinds of influences from all over the world. And we become almost dull to this point. 41, an increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life for both the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. Prabhupada writes, according to the rules and regulations of fruitive activity, so again, this isn't spiritual transcendence, there is a need to offer periodical food and water to the forefathers of the family, you know, pinda. And then a little later, such help rendered to forefathers is a family tradition, and those who are not in devotional life are required to perform such rituals. One who is engaged in the devotional life is not required to perform such actions. Simply by performing devotional service, one can deliver hundreds and thousands of forefathers from all kinds of miseries. And then Prabhupada quotes this 11th canto verse. In the last sentence, such obligations are automatically fulfilled by performance of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Lord Chaitanya did do the Shraddha ceremony, though. So, what? It's explained in the Chaitanya that in his authorized biographies that he did that just to satisfy the relatives and not be seen as someone going against society. But it didn't cover his bhakti. By doing that, he wasn't thinking, oh, I have to do this or my forefathers are in trouble. No, Prahlad, you know, in the 7th canto, it says that so many generations are liberated forwards and backwards when someone becomes a pure devotee. So we may do that, Shraddha ceremony, pinda, to satisfy relatives, but it's not that we're doing it because we have so much faith in that. No, we have faith in Krishna, in the process of Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada writes, at the present moment, nobody knows that after death there is life, and still such life is connected with the family, the forefathers, and the descendants. Nothing of this science is known at the present moment, more or less exactly like animals. And an animal has no such feelings of connection, simply the number of days he will eat. He will eat, sleep, have sex life, and die. That's all. This subtle regulation of family connection is unknown at the present moment, and still they are very proud of advancement of knowledge. Arjuna was not a brahmana, nor a sannyasi, nor a grihastha. He was on the battlefield. He's not a Vedantist, but just see how his knowledge is perfect. This is Vedic culture. At the present moment, they are reading Bhagavad Gita for years and years, important scholars, important theologians, and they cannot understand. One more. By the evil, 42, by the evil deeds of those who destroy the family tradition and thus give rise to unwanted children, all kinds of community projects and family welfare activities are devastated. Okay, so any questions, comments on those verses? No comments on those verses? No questions? Okay. Very good. Okay, so then 43. O Krishna, maintainer of the people, I have heard by descending succession that those whose family traditions are destroyed dwell always in hell. So then combining the sinful concern with the breaking a family tradition. Let me just check my notes. Oh, Prabhupada, right? So in Varnashram, there's a system where one has to atone for sinful activities before one dies, or else they go to the hellish planets. So Arjuna is citing this authority to support his argument that those who destroy family traditions go to hell. And in a lecture Prabhupada gave, he said, we are Vaishnavas. Our only desire is how to satisfy Krishna. That is the tradition of everyone, but especially Vaishnavas. They must be very alert, very careful how to keep Lord Vishnu or Krishna satisfied. That is our only business, so you should not neglect it. Otherwise, you spoil everything. When you have invited Vishnu, Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to accept your service, you must be very, very careful how to render service, how cleanly, how clean, how nicely you have to serve. Otherwise, everything will be spoiled. A Vaishnava's Kula Dharma is simply to satisfy Krishna. So that's the transcendental point of view. So 44. Alas, how strange it is that we are preparing to commit greatly sinful acts, driven by the desire to enjoy royal happiness. We are intent on killing our own kinsmen. So again, happiness, sins, both purport. Driven by selfish motives, one can be inclined to such sinful acts as the killing of one's own brother, father, or mother. Again, Aurangzeb, Kamsa, others. There are many such instances in the history of the world, but Arjuna, being a saintly devotee of the Lord, is always conscious of moral principles and therefore takes care to avoid such activities. Okay, then 45 is an important verse. Better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, were to kill me unarmed and unresisting on the battlefield. And the apratikaram is an important word here. Means without being resistant. And Prabhupada talks about this. Pratikaram means counteraction. Here in this material world, for everything there is counteraction. So if you're diseased, you have to take medicine. This is pratikaram. Similarly, if somebody is coming to kill you, you also prepare to kill him. This is pratikaram. If somebody is drowning in the sea, then you have to help him by sending a lifeboat so that he can be saved. So everywhere there is danger, and there is pratikaram, counteraction, how to save yourself from it. This is called the struggle for existence. So here Arjuna's position. Krishna has already arranged the battle. He knows that Krishna wants this battle. Still, he says, Yadi mam apratikaram. He decides in his own way. This is called Maya. He knows what Krishna desires. He knows what Krishna's desire is, and still he is speaking his own philosophy. Do we ever do that? We know what Krishna wants of us, but still somehow we figure out how to rationalize it in our mind to not do that, but to do something else. That means Arjuna is placing himself on the position of an ordinary man. An ordinary man does not know Krishna and what is Krishna's desire, and he manufactures his own philosophy and thoughts. Whatever we have manufactured, prakriti-karam, counteraction, will also fail if Krishna does not sanction it. That is realized by Prahlad Maharaj. He says, "My Lord Nrsingadev, the parents of children are not actually protectors of the children. Every father and mother wants to protect the child, but still the child has to meet some danger and die. A person is suffering from such disease, some fatal disease. If you think, I shall engage a first-class physician and I shall supply first-class medicine, then the patient will be saved. But that is not possible. Therefore, real pratikaram is Krishna consciousness. It's better we take shelter of Krishna." And then the last verse, Sanjaya said, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on a chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief. And this is not a small thing, him putting down his Gandiva bow. Arjuna had actually taken a vow that to kill anyone who ever suggested he put down his bow. There was a story in the Mahabharata, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, that Karna had defeated and injured Yudhisthira. And Karna was, he told Yudhisthira, "You're not even a Kshatriya. You should learn how to fight. See how easily I have defeated you. I'm not even going to bother to kill you." So this Arjuna heard of Yudhisthira's injury, and so he immediately left the battlefield, went to Yudhisthira's tent. And upon hearing, when Yudhisthira heard that Arjuna had left the battlefield, Yudhisthira, he understood, Arjuna must have avenged my honor. He killed Karna, and he's come to tell me this. But it wasn't true. Arjuna left the battlefield only out of concern for Yudhisthira's injury. That's why he left it. So as soon as Yudhisthira saw Arjuna, he said, "Have you killed Karna and avenged me?" Arjuna said, No, I didn't kill Karna. I only came to see how badly you were hurt. And Yudhisthira was furious. He said, "You have left the battlefield without even killing Karna? You coward. How could you have done this? It is better that you give up your Gandiva bow." And then when Arjuna heard that, he got really angry himself, right? And he said, "How dare Yudhisthira suggest that I give up my Gandiva bow, which is more dear to me than my life? I have vowed to kill anyone who suggests that." So Arjuna takes out his sword to kill his brother, and then Krishna intervenes. And he says, "Okay, wait, right? You know what?" He was watching the whole time, and so he catches Arjuna's arm and said, "All right, you have to kill Yudhisthira, it's your vow, but kill him by insulting him. For a Kshatriya, an insult is worse than death." So as Yudhisthira was kind of sitting there saying, "What did I do? What did I say?" Arjuna angrily goes up to him and he says, "You said I'm a coward because I left the battlefield without killing Karna. But look what you have done. You looked on as our wife Draupadi was insulted. I would have alone killed the entire Kaurava army, but you would not allow me. You are not a man, you are not a king." So Arjuna was saying more and more insults. And then he quickly touched Yudhisthira's feet afterwards and said, "Please forgive me." So it's not a small thing at the end of this, first chapter, when it says that Arjuna put down his Gandiva bow. It's a very big deal. And people who saw this knew, whoa, what's going on? Right? It was a big thing, big thing. Okay, so questions, comments, thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes,
for quite some time, I have the doubt. Why Arjuna chose to communicate to Krishna that I will not fight on the battlefield. Why the previous day night he should not have confirmed? Why not earlier he should know? Why exactly the war is about to come and he communicated that to him? Is there any significance?
Yeah. It's super significant, right? You know, yeah,
Okay,
it's like, what?
yes.
Why would he say, Sere yor ubayor madye ratam stapay metrite, drive my chariot in front of the two armies? What do you want to see? Just, you know, start fighting. You know, what's your purpose in doing this? So he's being guided by Krishna so the Gita can be spoken. Because remember we said when we started last week that, you know all the things that happened in the, or many of the things that happened in the Mahabharata prior to the Bhagavad Gita. And it's like, you know, what's happening, all these amazing stories and pastimes, and the battle's about to begin, and the reader of the Mahabharata, they're on the edge of their seat. They probably, you know, can't put the book down. They're falling asleep at work the next day because it's so exciting. Who's going to win? And then Arjuna says, wait, time out. And then the greatest philosophy ever delivered is given in 700 shlokas, the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, so Arjuna was put in this situation by Krishna so that the Bhagavad Gita could be spoken. Just like ultimately Krishna arranged for Maharaj Parikshit to put the dead snake around Samak Rishi, so that Samak Rishi's son would curse him to die in 7 days. And then he had the great benefit of hearing the entire Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Correct.
Other comments, questions about anything in this chapter?
Krishna Prabhu, there's a note in the chat.
Okay. Didn't see it. How to understand the Prayaschitta verse 43 with respect to a devotee? As we have learned, NOD module, that is irrelevant. Yes, let's go to 43. I'm glad you're remembering something from Nectar of instruction. That makes me feel very good. Okay. Arjuna bases his, let's read the whole purport. Arjuna bases his argument not on his own personal experience, but on what he has heard from, we did read this purport already. So he's basing it, what he heard from authorities, but from which authorities? You know, the Artha Shastra. That is a way to receive real knowledge. One cannot reach the real point of factual knowledge without being helped by the right person who is already established in knowledge. There is a system in the Varnashram institution by which before death, one has to undergo the process of atonement for his sinful activities. One who is always engaged in sinful activities must utilize the process of atonement called the Prayaschitta. Without doing so, one surely will be transferred to hellish planets to undergo miserable lives as a result of sinful activities. So yes, Prabhupada is not recommending Prayaschitta here. He's saying in the Karma Kandik part of the Shastra, there is a process to get out of being in hell. And that is to perform these different Prayaschittas. So he's not recommending it here, because as you very wisely point out, Sadanand Keshava Prabhu or Navina Gopika Mataji, irrelevance is a good choice of words. It's the devotee transcends that. He understands that, you know, one Maha Mantra, circumambulating Tulsi, so many different aspects of bhakti. They don't just get rid of the sinful activities, but if you remember, they get rid of the desire to commit sinful activities, which is much deeper than the external activity. So yeah, Prabhupada's not, he's just pointing out that in the Varnashram system, the mundane Varnashram system, if one can perform, there are atonements that one can perform called Prayaschitta. Is that all right?
But in Nectar of Devotion, we have seen that this Prayaschitta is not meant for Krishna conscious devotees. Also,
Right.
Prabhu? Correct.
Yes, exactly. That's what I just said. Yeah. So Prabhupada will sometimes, just because he mentions something, it doesn't mean he's endorsing it. He's just giving some knowledge here. About what what atonement is, or what the standard Vedic, but he's not endorsing it. What else? Okay, well, then the homework for next week, we can end a little early, is to, I don't know if we'll get through it because it starts getting to be very philosophical, but please read from up to verse 20, well, up to verse 19 of the second chapter, and answer the questions for those two sections.